everyone at home. This meeting today is open to the public. We do not have any items that will require the public to be excluded. The meeting will be webcast. The recording will be available for people to view later through the Council's website. We have received 1 petition, 3 public questions and 2 questions from members. Please can I request that mobile telephones and other such equipment are switched to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from Town Hall staff. The assembly point is Tudor Square. Can we have introductions? I'm Councillor Joe Otten, Councillor for Doran-Totley and Chair of this committee. And let's go down the tables here.
Councillor Mark Rusling, Councillor for Sheffield and Brightside and Deputy Chair.
Minesh Parrott, Councillor for Crick and Crossbow Ward.
Councillor Mary Lee at Darnell Ward.
David Barker, Richmond Ward.
Councillor Peter Gilbert, Ecclesall Ward.
Christine Gilligan, Councillor for Hillsborough Ward and spokesperson on this committee.
Tim Hagan, Councillor for Crooks and Crossbow Ward.
Sue Alstone, Councillor for Fulwood Ward.
Thank you. And can I say welcome to Councillor Mark Rusling as Deputy Chair of the committee as a new appointment. Officers?
Good morning, Committee. Robert Parkin, Assistant Director of Legal Services.
Morning Committee, Richard Eyre, Director of Street Scene and Regulations.
Good morning, I'm Amanda Clayton from Democratic Services.
Thank you. We are all here, so there are no apologies for absence. There is no need for exclusion of the press and public. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree those as a correct record? There's one point I'd like to raise under the work programme, but let's agree those as a record first here. Yes, I'll take that as agreed. Item 5, public questions, petitions, questions and statements. So we have first a... have we got all the questions in this packet?
We've got petition first.
Petition first. Ah, yes, yes. Okay. Yes, can we have the petition? Ibrahim Hussain, please, first.
Good morning, Chair, to everyone. I hope you cannot hear me clearly. I just want to ask before I start, I did read something in the, I received a link that there was some sort of a response to my petition. Was it this one or the previous? Because I couldn't really read it properly. It was so small. It was in your petition log section, it might be. But I can present my petition, the one I've got anyway. So
Yeah, we'd like to present your petition, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. This petition, the real purpose is that from the previous meeting you held as a proposed fee increases for the taxi licensing, I set up this petition and the purpose is as follows. We understand, object to the proposed licensing fee increases and request improvements to the services provided. 1, license fees. The proposed fees, the driver, vehicle and private hire operator license fees are unjustified due to poor enforcement, outdated IT system and lack of financial transparency. These issues must be addressed before any fee hikes are introduced. We also have increased in the miscellaneous fees, so we oppose the fee increases in miscellaneous fee section. Service efficiency should be prioritized, especially through digital improvements to reduce cost. You have addressed in your report the license duration, which the 2-year we welcome. In a sense, now you addressed us through the consultation. And immediate private operator license options, maintaining these provides flexibility for drivers and operators. Private hire banding, which the banding system risks disadvantaging smaller operators. A fairer, more balanced approach should be addressed, as is you have addressed, but not fully as I would have expected. The service and IT improvement, the council's IT and customer service systems needs a complete overhaul. Best practices from other councils should be adopted to improve the digital experience for users. We have been raising this for considerable number of years, and we are still where we are. In your consultation recently, you have addressed, Chair, the issues of consultation going ahead with vehicles consultation. So I just want to add a few bits and then I will finish because I don't want to take too much of your time. Just before that, because I wrote all this down. Yeah, so the question really is with regard to transparency and forensic breakdown of accounts. We have been asking for some time, and as part of this petition, despite repeated requests, we have not received a forensic breakdown of how these fees are calculated or answers to the specific question raised. Why has the council failed to provide this transparency? What measures are in place to ensure accountability in how these fees are being spent? The enforcement system is clearly not working and needs a complete overhaul. How does the council plan to address the lack of effective enforcement to ensure compliance with licensing rules? Or what specific improvements are being made and when will they be implemented? Service and IT improvement, promises of future improvements to IT and customer service are insufficient. What immediate actions will the council take to improve the accessibility and efficiency of services? Why are operators and drivers being forced to pay more for services that remain fundamentally broken? Banding for operators, the introduction of a new banding system risks disadvantaging small operators. What specific measures are being put in place to ensure fairness and prevent discrimination against smaller businesses? We demand real answers, not vague commitments. These proposed fee increases are unjustifiable without immediate service improvements, proper enforcement and complete transparency. That's why we are objecting, because we're not getting value for money. I do understand things go up, but not the way they are set out, Chair. Just a few examples. Vehicle renewal, that's the plate. We pay annually £163. That's going up to £212 a year, 30% increase. 1 year taxi badge, which was £97, is going up to £223, that's 130% increase. A 3-year badge, which was £217, going to £268, 23% increase. But the service which we are getting is not adequate, and the licensing service reception area is still closed for us. The telephone service is very poor. The IT is outdated. So what we are paying for, I would expect as a stakeholder to get back as well. And I'm asking that you refuse these increases and we work together and make sure the service has improved. I do know things cost money, but it can't cost 130% increase and 30% increase in those percentages. So I hope you do take note of what the drivers have said, and we are saying out. I don't just come up here at 10 o'clock in the morning to waste my time and just have a go at you guys. But I think we all have to work together to resolve these issues. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Abraham. The Waste Treating Committee considered a report to increase taxi licensing fees and charges on the 19th of July 2024, agreeing unanimously to approve for public consultation such increases. Due to objections received, a follow-up report is to be presented to the committee today. This report details comments received during the consultation period and puts forward several recommendations. The report details work undertaken as a result of the consultation and proposals to maintain driver and operator licence options, as well as an additional private hire operator banding for smaller businesses. The service is The service is currently reviewing online information, advice and guidance available to support licence holders in accessing council services. The updated and improved resources will be published on the website using new page templates and layouts designed to enhance digital access for customers. Phase 1 of this review focuses on improving how information is presented, including new online forms, website pages and easier to read policy documents, enabling self-service for licence holders and passengers. Additionally, we are planning to extend these improvements to our telephony services and back-office inquiry management systems in the future. Licensing Service is also currently consulting on a review of the private hire vehicle specification, including changes to vehicle age limits based on emissions, which will hopefully provide licensees with greater choice. This will be considered by Western Street Scene in 2025. The Licensing Service is committed to service improvements and will continue to work with the trade. I will add, Ibra, look, I think we all take on board the points that you make. I will just observe that the fees were last increased in 2016. Inflation since then is effectively 34% CPI inflation. So anything that's less than 34% is a real terms reduction in fees compared to 2016. So I appreciate some have gone up more than that and some have gone up less because we've done some more work in calculating where the costs actually fall. But it's not, it's not the case, as you said, that 30% is like a swinging increase. It's actually a real terms cut, and the deficit that the service has been running, legally we could have reclaimed some of that deficit in the fees we agreed today, and we're not proposing to do that. The deficit that we've been running in terms of the cost of running the service relative to the fees, the council has eaten. So, so it could have been a lot worse, I suppose, is what I'm saying to you there. Okay, can I have the first questioner, please? James Smith. Is he here? I don't think James is here. Okay, so there's a written response which has been provided. Yeah, okay. Can I have the next questioner? Is Lee Ward, please? Lee, is Lee here? Okay, well, again, there's a written answer to Lee's original question, which is published on the website. There's a supplementary question which members have seen. There will be a written answer provided for that. We can't give an answer right now to the supplementary because we need a conversation with finance. But that will be provided. Okay, thank you. So, item 6, members' questions. So, questions from Sue. Sue, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. Thank you. Yeah, I would just like to ask. Firstly, thank you for the responses. My question is, as a supplementary, if the licensing service for this council were to make it mandatory that bars or similar nightclubs, etc., in the city operated an Ask Angela or equivalent scheme, would it be then possible for the council to check that that scheme was running properly and was therefore actually providing a safe service for people in using those services and feeling vulnerable? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for that. Thanks for that. I'm aware of the press reports of a number of authorities of schemes that places notionally having Ask for Angela schemes and then not actually delivering it, and when that was tested by undercover journalists. My understanding is that any condition in a licence is grounds for review of that licence if it's not being met. But as in terms of what resource there is for active investigation, proactive investigations in terms of whether licence conditions are being met, I don't know. Rich, can you speak on that, or Ian?
I can see Ian's walking around, so I'll let Ian pick up the detail. But yeah, the Ask Angela scheme, we do some tests, infrequent tests, if I'm honest, with various guys, whether that be trading standards or the licensing team when they're doing inspections. but it is probably something we need to put on our forward plan to start doing more tests and actually challenging some businesses what aren't doing it, some of the nighttime economy which aren't actually carrying it out. So it's definitely something we can incorporate into our future plan, but I'll let Ian pick up the detail.
Yeah, I think just to follow on that, if there's any suggestion that it's not happening or it's not working, then we need to consider that as part of our enforcement response. Obviously, you would want us to put our enforcement into the areas where there's the potential greatest harm, and for it to be intelligence-led. But absolutely, if there is a condition there and there is a suggestion that it's not working, then we would need to review that and decide how best to do that.
Thanks. I mean, can I infer from this that even if we don't have explicitly in the licensing policy that premises must operate as for Angela, that it's implicit that they look after their customers' safety, and that any failure to do that would be potentially a grounds for review?
Yeah, certainly within licensing and generally under their Health and Safety at Work Act responsibilities, they've got a duty to protect the health and well-being of customers. If it's a direct responsibility under the Health and Safety at Work Act, that would be the primary legislation. If there are elements that have been conditioned, they would also be picked up in that way. So that there's a range of responsibilities they would have, whether that's physical things, you know, slips, trips, falls, things like that, to not serving alcohol if someone's visibly drunk. There's a range of things that we would tackle. A lot of it is based on trying to do the preventative works and making sure that you know, the premises are safe, the operating procedures are right in advance. But obviously enforcement through the health and safety team and also through the licensing team can then follow up if there is evidence that things are not happening. And that includes reviewing incidents, it's reviewing accidents and things like that.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Are you happy with that, Sue?
Actually, that sounds really positive. So yes, I am happy, and yeah, maybe we'll come back and just see if anything's happened in a little while. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Mark, do you have a supplementary?
Just on a couple of them. Question one, thank you. Just to say yes, I think it will be useful to get that information via the closed appendix. So that was the follow-up for that one. And then question three, again, very similar. I think it would be useful for all elected members to know that that is something they can do for their tenants' residents associations. I know in the northeast of Sheffield, where I represent, there are lots of conversations that go back and forth because there isn't the right person in the room. And I think sometimes those conversations could be better handled just by having the right person in the room. So if we can proactively get that information out to ward groups, that would be great. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, so on the first point, I think we have an item on the work programme coming up where we're receiving that kind of data about Amy performance. So, you know, that's on the work programme. Yes, the second one, yeah, I concur. I mean, I find it very useful talking to the Amy Black stewards. First place to go after. If you can't, and members do need to know this. I think it's a fair observation because if members don't know this, they email me or the head of highways or somebody. You know, when really you can get it sorted out locally without having to escalate that far. Okay, Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Just to follow up on that, we do a members briefing pack specifically on the street air contract, so we'll redo that as part of the knowledge briefing. That's got all the relevant contacts and that process, your first point of call and where to escalate if needed. So we'll circulate that as well.
Yeah, I think it needs to go to all members rather than just Western. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay, next item is work programme. Right. Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to draw your attention to page 19. There was a referral to the Transport, Regeneration and Climate Policy Committee from Council, and they've now referred a portion of that to us. So the details are there and the proposed response. So we just need to determine that we're happy with that response.
Thank you. Yes. So let's turn to that. Let's deal with this first. I don't know if I can ask. I think the Greens. It was your motion that Council passed, wasn't it? That that asked for these things. Are you happy with the officer's response on pages 19 to 21?
Mostly.
Well, I mean, I suppose the question is, because obviously there's a narrative statement about the importance of payments and so on, the sort of thing that full council does, but if there was some more detailed thinking behind that, which would suggest a course of action you wanted to pursue here, then now would be the time to say.
No, I think the only issues we were not 100% happy with, but we understand why the answer is as it is if we are promoting more walking and cycling through the city, we have to make sure that people can do this safely in winter. And this is about ice on the footpaths and cycleways and leaves that cause slippage. And, you know, you said we're not legally required to remove leaves on all of the roads, but I think it would be worth considering if they are causing a danger to pedestrians, as we are trying to encourage people to walk. And the same with ice. It does say that there's precautionary, that there are grit bins and people can grit themselves, but a lot of the cycle routes in particular probably don't go near a grit bin. So I just think it would be nice if we could look at this in a bit more detail.
Yes, of course. Let's not. I've seen you, Minesh, in a second. So was that hand, Minesh? Yeah. Was that hand, Mary? No. Okay. Yes, of course. Gritting for bicycles is different to gritting for roads, as we all know. Let's not get into all the details. A cycle path needs application of brine and not application of grit, salted grit, but for technical reasons. But it's a fair point, isn't it? I forget where I was going with that now before I got distracted. Minesh, do you want to come in?
Thanks. It was, kind of a question on this point because I don't know where else it would go. On the commentary on making Sheffield a pedestrian-friendly city, it just mentions that we have the largest percentage precautionary gritting network in the UK and more grit bins than any other local authority. I want to check if those are figures per capita, if they're absolute terms, and if after the meeting we could get a percentage comparison, across maybe core cities. Be helpful to just get that benchmarking generally, because often we all, I'm sure, get complaints about gritting and the extent of the grit network, so it's helpful to know potentially that we are doing more. But yeah, interested if it's per capita or not.
I don't know if I don't have that on the top of my head. We can get that. I think I think my observation is that yes, we do have more. However you measure it, but we have, due to the terrain, due to the hills, and due to the large rural area in the city, we kind of need more. And so whether therefore we have more in proportion to our need is a difficult question, isn't it?
I think that's why I'm quite interested, because obviously Birmingham's such a bigger geographic area that if we have more both gritting and grit bins than Birmingham, that's really interesting to me. But yeah.
Okay. Right. So yes. So going back to the question, I mean, yes, is there a proposal here for further action, I suppose, is the question on this referral?
I don't know whether we want direct further action, but there's a proposal for further discussion about what we can do. Does that work?
Okay. No, we can do that. We certainly do that. Shall we do that? Shall we take that up in the knowledge briefings? Okay, we will do that. Okay, so also on the work programme, I just wanted to highlight the minutes on page 12, 34.1.3. The last meeting we agreed to have a look at the city centre management in the round in terms of the issues which affect the quality of the experience for people visiting the city centre effectively that are within this committee, and also, I mean, I suppose in the round for the whole council. I'm aware that Communities, Parks and Leisure on Monday agreed a public space protection order, which I think is also relevant here, isn't it? It's certainly, which is certainly something that that I've had many representations in favour of, including the bid where I represent the council. They're always bending my ears, and when are we going to get a PSPO? But all of these other issues are also something that they're very interested in, as are many people in Sheffield. We have not had any progress on that. Is there? How are we going to carry that forward?
Thanks, Chair. So It's not currently on the forward plan, but as we discussed in knowledge briefings, Ben was actually in the room today, so Ben's leading that review. Now we've got the PSPO, that's a key part of it, but Ben will be doing a deep dive into city centre management team, looking at all the performance matrices, but also then what do the next sort of 3 to 5 years look like with all the regeneration. You'll be aware Castlegate came up in the budget where we're creating new fantastic public places, but we've got to make sure we've got the sustainability around them to be able to maintain these places for the next generation. So that'll be a key part of it as well. As the city grows, can the city centre management and can the teams keep scale with that? But that'll be part of the review, and that'll be on the forward plan for next year.
Right, so I mean, it needs to be on the work programme then? Yeah. So can we make sure the next version of the work programme has that? Yeah, no, I agree, Castlegate, and not just Castlegate, but all of the investments that are going into the city centre to improve it we're not going to get the full benefit of those if we don't also make good use of the keep it safe and pleasant. So
yeah, this is on a separate part of the work programme, if that's okay. Yeah.
Go on.
Yes, I've just, to be fair, I only noticed when I read this morning. On the page 22, I noticed that the emergency planning review and the response to the Grenfell inquiry has been removed from our work programme. Now, I understood that emergency planning was on the remit of this committee, and it was my request at an earlier meeting of this committee that we include in that response to Grenfell. And I see now we are not deemed the right committee for dealing with this, and it has got to go to Strategy and Resources. Yet another item that has to go to Strategy and Resources because the committee is not deemed appropriate. Can you please somebody explain why? Because I'm really not happy.
Yes, Rob, would this be you?
I think, yeah, I can take a view. I wasn't aware of the detail of this one, so I just need to turn up the remit. I don't know if anyone else has seen the background of this and can comment. Richard and I.
Thanks, Rob. So, yeah, you're correct. Emergency planning falls in the remit of this committee. An element of that, the emergency planning review, actually does stay in this committee, and that needs to come on the forward plan. As members are aware, we are doing a review of our response to a major incident and bringing in a new incident management plan. The last plan was 2019, so that's been reviewed, and that's now been agreed by SLB to be incorporated. So we'll be bringing that to this committee. However, the wider response to the Grenfell inquiry was seen as a corporate response, not just emergency planning, because it also impacts housing committee, etc. So the decision being made to take that to Strategy and Resources as a corporate response to the Grenfell inquiry. We will pick up elements relating to emergency planning via knowledge briefings and that emergency planning review, but the overall response to Grenfell and the inquiry is Strategy and Resources.
On here it says emergency planning review is going to Strategy and Resources, and when I read the Grenfell inquiry report, which I have read, most of it is around emergency accommodation and the provision of and the organisation of, and I would have thought that fell under emergency planning. I just think, and I know I'm now in doing governance stuff in this committee, but I just think it's yet another example of taking stuff away in order to send everything back to SNR.
So, yeah, you're correct. It does say emergency planning review. That's an error that needs to come here. So the review of the emergency planning function definitely sits in this committee. I suppose in the example you've given around emergency accommodation, emergency planning instigate that, but the actual strategy around where we will put people, the strategy around where our accommodation is, that sits in the housing area. So it is a corporate function, not an emergency planning function. The how and the implementation sits squarely with emergency planning, but the actual detail of where we put people and how we look after those people in that position sits outside this committee.
SNR is quite capable, and indeed it is in its remit, to delegate to a committee something which does also cross into another committee and suggest that they work together. And I do just feel that this is the wrong decision.
I mean, yeah, I've seen you, Minesh. It strikes me that emergency planning is ours, and the housing element is housing. What else is there makes it S&R, apart from those two things?
Again, I've not made this decision personally. I've been instructed it's an S&R decision, a corporate response to the Grenfell inquiry. But in there, you've got housing response, you've got the council-wide response, particularly on recovery as well, around Grenfell inquiry. So I've not made the decision personally to take it out of this committee. I can take that away as a challenge. I will challenge the S&R and colleagues why it's been deemed to go to Strategy and Resources and not this committee. But emergency planning, just to reassure, it does definitely sit in this committee, and the review of emergency planning function will definitely sit here.
Okay, so I think we can. Well, let's Minesh and Mark go on.
Thanks. I mean, not to make this a governance debate, but I do actually think there are a lot of functions relating to a Grenfell review that should go to S&R that are cross-cutting, that aren't just waste and street scene focused. You know, I understand that emergency planning sits in this committee, I think mostly because it sits under Richard's directory. That makes sense according to the designation, but housing response, emergency accommodation response, that makes a lot of sense to be a cross-cutting decision, which I don't think should be covered by a committee which mostly covers operation, like contracts. I think it's entirely appropriate for that to be moved. I think we're making a lot of nothing. Actually, I could see a benefit to the whole review going to S&R, but that's by the by.
Okay, Mark.
Well, just to follow up on Nesh's point, I think having read most of the report as well myself, a lot of it seemed to be, in common with a lot of reports like this, stuff falling through the cracks of different public authorities, and I agree that the best way of making sure that in Sheffield that doesn't happen is that it's considered corporately at S&R. But I do agree with Richard's point, making sure that those bits that do clearly sit within one committee, emergency planning being here, that they do go to those committees. But again, I think it should be considered by S&R corporately.
Okay, well look, we're not in control of the S&R's work programme here, so I'm sure they will consider what they need to consider. It does strike me that sometimes when we say corporately, we mean there may need to be money spent on this that is not in the budget of any of the other committees, and only S&R can dip into the reserves, and that's why something has to be there, which is maybe true, but it's also slightly tragic. I'm right in saying that but I'm advised that it was an error to say remove emergency planning from the work programme, the emergency planning review. So that is still in the work. That should still be in the work programme. So it's a correction we can agree. But obviously, I think we recognise that well, S&R may and almost certainly will take a corporate item on the whole package. Okay, let's move on from that. If that is agreed, with those alterations, can we agree the work programme? Thank you. Okay. Next item is budget monitoring. Who do we have to present this? Yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself and the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jane Wilby, Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting, and I'm here to present the Q2 budget monitoring position for the Council. The paper includes 6 months of accounts up to the 30th of September and a 6-month forecast to the end of the year. The full report was taken to the Finance and Performance Committee on the 18th of November, so some people might have already heard this update, but it is important for the committee to consider the overall financial context of the Council when considering decisions that impact on committee budgets. The Council is reporting a 34 million overspend against the budget, which is approximately 7% of our net revenue budget. The Council plans to fund that in-year deficit through a combination of drawing from reserves and a use of a specific provision set aside to manage our housing subsidy loss issue. The financial position is driven by 3 main factors: funding reductions, increased demand and rising costs. We've experienced significant funding reductions across government. Sheffield has £858 less per to spend per household in real terms when compared to 2010-11, which is a reduction of 26%, which is above the national average of 18% per dwelling. We're experiencing increased demand for our services, particularly from our most vulnerable citizens. and post-COVID, we've faced significant levels of inflation, which has impacted on our cost base. As a response, the 34 million overspend is substantial, so our officers are working diligently to develop solutions to reduce key areas of overspend. The position has remained stable from Q1, but targeted work from finance with service colleagues over the past quarter has helped us understand the drivers of the challenges and develop collaborative action plans. We are forecasting to deliver 40 million of the 42 million savings target that was set as part of the budget process this year, which is a 95% success rate. The main challenges in the budgets are for adult social care, education, children and families, housing and finance and performance committees that have significant overspends. These issues are primarily due to the rising costs in adult social care, home to school transport for children with special educational needs and tackling homelessness. The Waste and Street Scene Committee budgets are forecasting to underspend by £500,000 against a net revenue budget of 73.2 million as at Q2. This underspend is providing some mitigation for the Council's overall position and shows a good overall budget management and commitment to managing within resources. There are some overspends within committee budgets, for example, environmental regs, city centre markets and licensing. Officers are working to ensure that these areas of overspend do have action plans in place to bring them back to balance, particularly in relation to reviewing fees to ensure the Council properly recovers on the cost of delivering services. These overspends are being offset in year by income above budget in parking services. Assumptions around behavioural change has been factored into the business planning process to adjust income expectations for next year. The Council's key response to these challenges is the Future Sheffield programme, which is focused on transforming our services to create a more sustainable and efficient operating model. Transformation is essential to ensure we can continue delivering our statutory services while supporting city growth. Our transformation efforts align with the Council's broader strategic goals and have played a significant role in our budget setting process this year. Our medium-term financial strategy, published in July, identified a budget gap of £68.9 million over the next 4 years, with a £31 million gap next year. The autumn statement from government indicated a 3.2% real-term increase in core spending power for 25-26, which included a 4.99% council tax increase, which was better than our original planning assumptions. The government plans to reform funding allocations, starting with a targeted approach in 25-26, followed by a broader redistribution in 26-27. This should result in a clearer multi-year financial outlook, aiding our strategic planning and resource management. Services have worked hard to develop savings proposals to bridge next year's gap, and a full report will be presented to the Finance and Performance Committee on the 16th of December to present that current position. We expect to receive full details on the final finance settlement around this time, with details to be worked through in January, presented to S&R in February ahead of full council approval in March. So the paper is to note the financial position as at Q2, and I'm happy to take any questions about the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any hands. I will just repeat my constant refrain that I think we could improve our budget position by £500,000 a year if the Transport Regeneration and Climate Committee could get on with reviewing the Green Permit Scheme. So please lock them in a room until they've done that. It was a great scheme in its day, but it's excessively generous and has fallen behind where our ambition needs to be in terms of clean motor vehicles. Minesh.
Just to welcome the budget and the slight relief we've been given from it. And I think on page 35 it says there was £0.6 million for social care, but I think that's £0.6 billion. A slightly more welcome figure from the government.
Thank you for that. If there are no other comments, can we agree this item? I'll take silence as agreement. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jane. Moving on to the next item, item 9, the taxi licence fee review. Craig, Ben, do you want to come and introduce yourselves and present the report? Thank you.
Hi, Ben Brailsford, Assistant Director, Street Scene Services.
Morning, Craig Harper, Chief Licensing Officer. So I'll just go through the report quickly, as I'm sure members have all had sight of it and read it. So on the 19th of July this year, the committee approved a report with a recommendation that fees and charges be approved for public consultation and for those to come into effect from the 1st of October should no objections be received. We did receive a number of objections, so it's recommended that these be considered and that one of three proposed options as set out in Appendix C be approved to take effect from the 3rd of February next year. I'd just like to touch on the Future Sheffield programme, as I know that has been mentioned in some of the consultation responses. So, as Councillor Otten also mentioned earlier, we are currently reviewing all the online information, advice, guidance and available to support licence holders in accessing our service. The updated and improved resources will be published on the website using new page templates, layouts designed to enhance our digital access for customers. Phase 1 of the review focuses on improving how information is presented, including online forms, website pages, and easier to read policy documents. So that enables people to better self-serve, both for licence holders and passengers alike. We're also looking to extend these improvements to our telephony services and back office enquiry management systems in the future. So we are looking to increase licence fees across the board, so that's in respect of vehicles, drivers and operators. We understand that fees should be set in a consistent way and that council cannot make a profit from these charges. Fees were last reviewed in 2016 and despite an increase in our service costs during this period, additional costs have not been recovered and passed on to the licensees. Officer time does remain the single highest cost of our service. We're allocating significantly more time to administering and enforcing the taxi licensing regime than in previous years. In the main, this is due to significant changes brought about by national legislation, the statutory private hire standards, and other mandatory requirements such as tax conditionality checks and the NR3 register. We did propose a reduction and consolidation in the number of available driver and private hire operator licences, as well as a different banding structure when we presented the report in July. However, due to comments received as part of the consultation, we've undertaken some work to look at reintroducing those. So that would be a 2-year driver licence, 2, 3, 4-year private hire operator licence, and an additional lower banding to help small businesses. As part of the consultation, we received 128 responses by the Have Your Say Sheffield programme, with a further 54 received by email. A number of those received by email were identical in what they were saying. A copy of all the responses and additional information can be found at Appendix D. Alternative options that the committee may look at are not approving the proposed fees, so that will continue to require subsidy from the general fund and or reductions in the quality and timeliness of our service, or approving a lower fee to that proposed. Again, that will require continued subsidy from the central pot. We did undertake an inequality impact assessment. That can be found at Appendix C for information. There's lots of information within that impact assessment. So just to run through the recommendations to the committee today. So the option 1 is that the taxi and private hire fees and charges as set out in Appendix C take effect from the 3rd of February. So that's option 1. Option 2 is that the fees and charges as set out in Appendix C, as well as a banding for a smaller operator, take effect from the 3rd of February. And then option 3 is the fees and charges as set out in Appendix C, as well as an option for smaller private hire operator bandings and the reintroduction of the 2, 3 and 4-year private hire operator licence and the 2-year driver licence be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments of David?
Just a couple of questions. You know, Ibrahim's come in and said, well, the service is awful. I don't know how he can say that because I've never seen any performance indicators, and I just wonder going forward, would it be helpful to publish some performance indicators so we can make a more informed choice of how well or badly you are performing? Because it's all hearsay, really.
Actually, at the last committee, we did a performance report on Q2 for various services within waste and street scene. and there were some licensing and specifically taxi licensing performance figures on that. So absolutely, we'd like to work with the committee to make sure that the kind of stuff that we are recording and monitoring in terms of performance is available more readily to the general public so that people can see how well we are performing. But in general, the service is performing well against the indicators that we came and spoke about in Q2. So yes.
And also just going forward, you know, do you think you'll be able to have more of a dialogue with the trade about fees in terms of, you know, if they say they want extra enforcement, saying, well, that would cost X much to implement, which would increase your licence fee by this amount. Would it be possible to have those sort of conversations, which I think everybody would appreciate?
Absolutely. Can I just touch on the point that you raised previously that Ben spoke about? I think it's important. I've got some figures here that may help members understand how busy we are as a service. So in the last 12 months, the last financial year, we undertook 3,500 applications. We took 20,000 phone calls. We undertook 604 reception appointments. So the reception is close to walk-in applications as we used to do, but our reception is still open by an appointment-based system. We undertook just over 3,500 DBS checks as well. So that's in addition to what we used to do. In terms of talking to the trade, I came into this post in May of this year, having worked in the licensing service for a number of years. And one of the things I'm really keen to do, and I think I have done since I started, is to have more dialogue with the trade. So we've got the taxi forum meetings that Councillor Otten chairs. Myself and Ben have met with other trade members. We've had meetings at the train station because of issues at the train station. And I've met with other trade members myself on a one-to-one basis to talk through specific issues and larger issues that are affecting the trade. I think members here in the trade will be aware that the taxi licensing regime at the moment is much more complex than it was when I came into post in 2012. There's lots more national checks. We've got issues with drivers working from out of town in Sheffield, which is a big task we're having to undertake. So I am committed to working with the trade and members alike moving forwards. I think that's the only way we're going to get a better service. The trade are going to understand what we are doing, more transparency, rather than seemingly doing things behind people's back, which is absolutely not what we do within the licensing service. And I'm committed to making that change moving forwards.
Thank you, that's good to hear.
And I think just to add to that, I mean, clearly the licensing function for taxis is about maintaining public safety. So I think it's really important that we make sure that we are maintaining that public safety and balance that with working with the trade, because what we don't want to do, again, is provide over onerous costs that then force people out of the trade, because again, that kind of creates issues for public going forward. So we will get that balance right by working with the trade, but also considering the safety of members of the public.
Thanks, David. If I can put you on the spot, David, what performance indicators would you like to see of the licensing service? And I will accept as an answer that we should talk to the trade at maybe at the taxi forum to see what indicators they would like to see. But
I think firstly, things Craig mentioned about the volume of work is helpful to see, the amount of processing that happens. But also I was thinking specifically about enforcement. What enforcement action are we taking? What's the impact of that? Those sort of things, because enforcement's been referred to a lot. And I know it happens, but I don't have a lot of detail on it. You know, I think of an example where I'd had issues about overcharging, raised it with licensing, and they'd already undertaken 2 exercises to clamp down on it. So to know that those things are happening, I'd find that really helpful.
yeah, no, I agree. Thank you. Can we put that on the agenda? Mark and then Minesh.
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, thank you for Ibrahim and Craig for the different perspectives. I've read all of the consultation comments, so I understand that there's disquiet around a lot of it, and some of it sits within this paper, and some sits within stuff that's coming in 2025. I hope that I hope option 3 ultimately does resolve some of the issues by keeping some of the flexibility for different years licence, and particularly the smaller private hire operators, which I think is really important to do. There's a big difference between someone running 2 or 3 cars and someone running 50. So I think it's good that they're back in. some of the issues that have been raised by Ibrad today and also within the consultation responses, I think just do need a little bit more clarity. I mean, the IT issues, I know we've said around future Sheffield, I've no doubt that work's happening, but I think it'd be very useful for us and for drivers and their reps to understand the timelines for that. When are they going to see these improvements? Because we're being very clear about the date that the fee increases will come in. I think we need to be equally clear about the dates that the improvements will come in. So that would be very helpful. Just coming back on the degree of work again, obviously in many ways that's a sign of health, that people are driving in Sheffield and being licensed by Sheffield. But I suspect some of those phone calls are phone calls that people don't want to make. It's that they can't do it online, or it's not clear how they do it online. So I think there is it's not a double-edged sword, but there's clearly an element to that where some of those phone calls shouldn't be made. They should be things that are easily dealt with. So I think, again, if we can be very clear about what improvements will be made to that online interface, I think that'd be really helpful to all of us. And then the third kind of area of clarity is something that's come up in Ibrad's petition and many of the consultation responses, is the clarity of where the money's spent. I think something akin to a smaller version of the booklet that comes out each year with where your council tax money is spent. Actually, where does this money go would be really helpful. And the money as a whole, because I'm aware it's not increasing for 8 years, that's probably a sign of a slight lack of dialogue, including the lack of the fee increases. And if we can get that right, and so the trade understand that better, I think that'd be really useful. Final point, it keeps coming back. I know it's not within the scope of this committee, but the cross-border working is clearly a farce. That England-wide system does not work. So that's something that I'm going to go away and have a think about personally, and maybe talk to you, Joe, about raising a conversation with the local government association, because I suspect the vast majority of local authorities in this country, with the exception of maybe one and two, are in the same boat, and that doesn't seem to be a situation that's sustainable. So that's something doesn't sit within the scope of this, but it, I think is almost the elephant in the room, isn't it? That cross-border working that we need to look at. But otherwise, I hope that option 3 has, from our perspective, solved some of the issues. Granted, they're not going to have solved all of them, but I think that clarity and the cross-border working is really important. Clarity does sit within this paper in this committee. Cross-border needs to come back here, doesn't sit here. But more a statement than a question.
Thank you. I think it was a statement, yes. Let's go to Minesh, and I will respond to some of those points. Minesh.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks both of you for all of your work on this, and for all of the taxi drivers for feeding in views and concerns as well. I think, it's taken a small while, but it's really comprehensive. I think it's a very difficult balance to balance, the costs of the service, people's needs, both members of the public using, taxis as a public service, and also taxi drivers themselves. I think we've got a very good output from this. I'm really pleased, as Mark has said, to see the potential retention of a 2-year option for drivers and operators as well. From the report, when we see 12% of drivers using 2%, a 2-year license, 29% of operators operating on a 2-year cycle, we know how important that is for people to have that flexibility. I think David's point is really important as well, because, there is a lot of work going on here, and I think evidencing that will provide some reassurance. I think to add another metric, potentially showing how quickly queries are answered, will help demonstrate to taxi drivers, yes, you can have a clearer sense of when things are dealt with. And I think, if we get, 20,000 phone calls and all of those are answered within a certain time period, that is more reassuring than, potentially the alternative. So I think potentially there's a job for us to just communicate better about how we are already doing, as well as, the regular improvements to the service, the customer service offer as well. So yeah, just to, again, a statement, really pleased with all the work that's gone into this. Thank you so much. And again, hopefully we'll see option 3 passed and as good an offer as we can deliver at this time.
Thank you. Yes, no, I'm going to say I'm also minded to support option 3. I think we held a consultation. Some very good points were made in that consultation about the extra flexibility that option 3 brings in. And the point of consultation is that you listen to the views that are expressed, don't you? I've seen you, Peter. I'm just going to respond to a couple of other points, seeing as I've started. I appreciate Mark, your comments on cross-border working. I hope that means we can agree as a committee that the committee will support. The committee will support whatever steps we choose to make, whether that's a letter to somebody or whatever it is. I hope that's agreed at this point, because we had some difficulty with that in the past. Okay, that's fine. So let's take that out of this room. But again, press this council's view on cross-border working and the problems that it brings. I did want to just refer to because a great many of the consultation responses do refer to the issues of signage and vehicle specifications, and they don't relate to this paper, as has been said. I would like to ask officers, in particular on the signage, what progress has been made, because I'm aware that we recognise there needed to be conversations with various user groups before we could progress with that. So can I ask where we are with that?
Yeah, so we hope to bring the signage report sooner than it probably is going to arrive at this committee. However, in the last couple of weeks, we've held stakeholder engagement meetings with women's groups, disability groups, and various other groups, which we think, safeguarding as well as transport, on what our potential proposals are and their views on those proposals. So they're coming back to us with some written comments on that. And then we have a meeting next January with a larger cohort of women's and safety groups on our proposals and what their kind of thoughts are on that. Once we've got those, we'd like to have a briefing with members on those comments before we take forward a consultation in the new year. So we'd like to have a meeting with the trade groups separately and then roll out a 4-week consultation period and then bring a report back to committee early next year on those proposals.
Okay, no, thank you for that. No, I appreciate that. I'm glad to hear that there has been progress on it, because obviously I'm aware the trade is very keen that we do the review that we promised some years ago now on the signage policy. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of councillors supporting option 2 or option 3, as it seems might be likely, can I just ask from officers' perspectives, part of the reason for removing the 2-year option was to make the service more efficient and thus, through efficiency, hopefully make the service more affordable for taxi drivers. Is there a danger in supporting option 3 that will then increase the costs for taxi drivers in the future, or rather will make the increase in costs more likely to happen for taxi drivers in the future? So although option 3 might offer more flexibility, option 2 might offer better financial returns for taxi drivers. Thank you.
It's difficult to say if there will be any future increases in fees and charges on whatever option is taken. However, all our fees and charges are worked out on the time it takes to administer a licence, so I can't see there being any drastic increases in regards to option 2 or 3 being accepted. We took the decision to move those options to put us in line with other core authorities and some benchmarking exercises that we did. But we're happy to reintroduce them on back of the consultation responses, and I think it's only fair that we listen to those consultation responses and try and help the trade as well as the service where we can. So we'll try to make savings where we can moving forwards in time to streamlining processes, better engagement with our finance partners as well, because there's lots of work that goes on in the background with finance and where the money should sit, and carrying over money for a 2-year and 3-year licence, that's more work than a 1-year licence, for example. But no, I can't see any drastic increases being brought about by those options.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, on that, I did note that there's nothing in the report on the financial implications between the options, and therefore I guess we don't have a basis in making a decision to say, well, on financially we should choose one or the other in terms of the advice we've been given. Sue.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the extra work that you've done. I think it is really important. I think it's really important that we listen. I was going to ask you the question that the Chair asked you about the signage report, because I think that I'm glad to hear you're progressing it, and I'm glad to hear you're doing that consultation on it. So obviously we just need to make sure that comes sooner rather than later. And I think it is your comments about increasing dialogue with the trade, and indeed the dialogue you're obviously having with other user groups, I think is really important, and that is incredibly welcome. So I haven't got any specific questions, given that the Chair's asked my question that I was going to ask. But yes, I mean, I shall be supporting option 3, and I think that is the right way to go, because it is listening to some of the comments that have been made. Thank you.
Thank you. So are there any further comments on this? Sorry, Mary, yes.
Yeah, thank you for the report. It's obviously a massive amount of work has gone into this, so it's really gratifying to see all that laid out in front of us. But I just want to, and again, reinforcing what colleagues have said about a better improved service and dialogue with all the stakeholders, including the trade, obviously, and the future Sheffield work that's going to go on over the next period of time, and getting some really key performance indicators and understanding what's happening. That's brilliant. I guess it's been 8 years since we reviewed licence fees, and I guess we don't want to be in a position again where we get to this kind of state and where it causes a lot of aggravation for everybody that's concerned. So I guess I want to make just a comment about making sure that doesn't happen again, and I'm sure that you will be addressing that one, but just to put it on the record. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right with that. The way fees are structured, we look at that over a 3-year period. If we're doing regular reviews, we can really make sure that any savings that are generated from cost efficiency measures are passed on to the trade, as well as making sure that if there is increases in cost, they're minimal and cited well in advance. So absolutely, we'll be committing to coming back with an annual fees review around this for members to consider.
Thank you. I don't see any further hands, so if we turn to the recommendations, can we? I think the mood of the meeting is that option 3. Is everybody in agreement with option 3? Okay, that's agreed. That option 3 is the option within the paper we're considering. Can we agree the recommendations? I'll take silence as the agreement of the meeting. Yep, that's agreed. Thank you very much. So that paper is agreed with option 3. Okay, final item is item 10, fly tipping strategy. Ian, is this you? And Tracy, of course, do introduce yourselves and present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So Ian Ashmore, Assistant Director, Environmental Regulation and Licensing.
Tracy Rayworth, Interim Environmental Enforcement Manager.
So, shall I kick off? Yep. So members will know that fly tipping has been a long-term issue for Sheffield, but also for other cities. It's something that we've always had to deal with. Whenever there's a cost of living crisis or a recession or anything like that, it can drive worse behaviours, and it's something we've always had to live with. We're not alone in that in Sheffield. It's a national issue, it's a European issue, you see it wherever you go. We've done lots of initiatives over the years in terms of things like cameras, target hardening, things like that. We've done comms campaigns, we've reported things, we've seized vans, we've tried innovative things around different pricing approaches and generally a whole series of things. Over more recent years we've worked more closely with the LACs. There was funding provided for work on things like target hardening. We reviewed 70 sites across the city where we felt there was a particular hotspot, and we whittled that down to a smaller number of sites that ultimately were signed off with LACs, and that provided more target hardening. So we've done things like that, but what we felt was there's nothing entirely new in fly tipping in terms of how you catch people. But what we did need is probably better coordination across all the services, and we needed to have something that was a bit more visible as a plan. How are we going to drive down figures? What can we do? There's a whole series of actions that we need to work on, and how can we get more visibility to that? So what we felt was needed was to have a new fly tipping reduction strategy that would be really visible, and we could track progress against those issues, because let me make it clear, our ambition is to really reduce the incidents and the costs across the city. More recently, we've been seeing some really unacceptable levels of fly tipping in some areas, despite the work we've done. People just willy-nilly coming out and chucking everything out. It's always been a balance on fly tipping, in that if you remove fly tipping too quickly, you can actually drive the wrong behaviours. So there is a degree of psychology that goes on here around, and we have seen that over many years. Some of you may recall old schemes like the New Deal, where we had a really short time frame for removing fly tipping, and what happened as a result was that we became the best free waste removal service in the city. People would just, why bother going to the tip? You just put the waste out in front of your house and the council comes and picks it up. So there is something around getting that balance right. So building on the work that we've done, we've produced this strategy. This is really just the starting point. The devil in the detail is going to be in the work that we do over the coming year, and the leadership around this piece of work, and the briefings that we do to update you on it. But our feeling is, having talked to various partners and yourselves over different periods, we've got a good range of actions here that should allow us to bit by bit reduce this. So you've got the overall committee report, obviously, but the details in that particular strategy. Large range of things. We've looked nationally at issues that are going on and seen if there's anything else that we could come up with. We have to say that if members or residents think of any other ideas, we're very open to that. As I say, it's a series of small actions that are probably going to do it. We did bring you a paper around the fly tipping, fixed penalties and prosecution work that we do, and you've already made an agreement that those fees will go up, so that's also part of this particular strategy. And you'll see that it's that balance of education, engagement and enforcement. I think without any of those, this will fail. So I think that's the overall approach that we're doing. I don't know whether you want me to go into more detail on it. I would also just say, though, that we've had a productive meeting with Amy on this. A large part of the fly tipping is obviously on Amy. It's part of the Amy contract. We don't pay anything different if fly tipping goes up or down, but obviously there are considerable benefits to Amy if fly tipping reduces, and therefore there's a big incentive there to work together to look at things like Investor Save and things like that, maybe sponsorship by businesses, all of the things that could actually drive it down and encourage better behaviour. So I'll just pause there. If I presume you have some questions.
Thanks. I've seen Tim.
Yes, a couple of things. We've had an issue in Crooks and Crosspool with, potential placement of cameras on sites that are regular spots for fly tipping, but it does seem to take forever for them to, things like CCTV cameras to go in and that sort of thing that they're looking at, and that's the thing. It speeds the essence, because if a site becomes notorious for an easy place to dump your rubbish, particularly in a built-up urban environment, it will tend to attract more rubbish again and again, and less action is seen to be taken, because word soon gets around that don't dump your rubbish here. So that's the first question: is how would you intend to speed that up? Secondly, I've seen reports that Derbyshire County Council are making people go into their tips have to be registered and have to then making sure they're within Derbyshire. Now that potentially has knock-on implications for us, for people who want to get rid of quantities of waste in Derbyshire, turn up there to get turned away or whatever, or decide not to go there for whatever reason, and then come into Sheffield and dump. I mean, are we having any dialogue with adjoining authorities and some of the actions they are taking that may adversely affect the situation in Sheffield?
Okay. So in respect of the cameras on the site, we've currently got 8 of the mobile cameras. I think you might recall that, I think we've mentioned this in briefings, that we have had a spate along with South Yorkshire Police where people were taking angle grinders to lighting columns and cutting down the lighting columns with our cameras on it, and that's led to some reduction in the cameras. The positioning of the cameras is very much based on where we were getting the highest fly tipping, and also where is the best chance of catching people. What we find is if it's cars that are turning up and people are driving there and they're tipping from a car, cameras can be really, really effective. If it's pedestrians, it's a lot harder, because you can imagine, you get a picture of someone, well, what do we do with that? I mean, you can help, but so I mean, in that particular site, I don't know whether it's that one of the things with camera sites is whether there's an electricity supply, are we putting on a column? Is there any drug activity in the area? Unfortunately, what we have found is if we put a camera up where if there's any drug dealing going on, the camera comes down very quickly, because the drug dealers do not want a camera there. So those are some of the issues around that. But if it's a case of you've requested it and it seems to be taking a long time, I don't know whether that's because we've said it's not a priority, or you're just not getting the answer. I mean, we can pick that up as a specific site and look at it. Certainly some of the sites for target hardening have taken a long time because they've needed planning permission and they needed engineering works. The sites where it was just putting a boulder down generally went very fast. So I think it's very much site specific, but we've done what was agreed as the initial top sites. I think there's about 3 sites still to deliver on that. But we'll then be needing to look at what are the next series of sites, what's changed, and start working on that. Because one thing I would say is when we put target hardening in, there can be a small amount of displacement to somewhere else, and that is something we will bring, and that's why we've put in about the river in the report, because we have seen an uptick in the cannabis gangs throwing cannabis waste in the river as we've target hardened some other sites. In respect of the waste, is there anything else you want to say on the cameras?
No, I just wanted to clarify, is that CCTV that you've requested as part of the local area committee stuff, or is it just something
Yeah,
that's
it's various levels of working of CCTV cameras, deterrence. That's one of the things we're talking about, without being too explicit about it.
Is it other antisocial behaviour, not waste issues? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, it's just because there seems to be quite a time lag to when a problem starts to develop, that we need to be looking at them, and speed sometimes is more of the essence of these, which may not necessarily be on properties that may be within the remit of housing or whatever, that sort of thing in some of the particularly urban areas I'm talking about.
I do wonder whether the new neighbourhood groups looking at antisocial behaviour, whether that might be something that gets picked up within them and dealt with more quickly. In respect of waste to Bring-It sites and the main household waste recycling sites, I'm aware that colleagues in waste have tightened up some aspects of that over recent years, but I've also heard the concerns that you get people from out of the area coming in and things like that, and I think that's something that we need to have ongoing discussions with our colleagues in waste management around. Are there other tools there that we can tighten up on? Is there a risk that people in other areas can come and tip? I mean, in terms of overall provision, as we've made in the report, we feel there's good provision, and there really is just no excuse for anyone tipping. So So we think it's there. There's lots of different options for getting rid of the waste. So why are people doing it? I think that's, obviously something we've got to turn around. But that specific point, I've not got all the detail on that, but it's absolutely something we need to look at as we go forward on this one.
I've seen lots of hands now. But just on Tim's point, if there was a location where time was of the essence, are we in a position to, if it was a priority, are we in a position to act quickly?
I would hope so. Certainly what Amy are doing is if they get some sudden uptick, and this is what we've talked about with Amy as part of this, that we do need them to be giving us the intel to say, if their frontline operatives find that for 2 or 3 days running, there's big piles of cannabis waste somewhere, well, let us know about that. Don't just pick it up. We really need to know, because we can then link in with the police. So I think we need to be agile, and I think part of the communications on this is to just make tackling fly tipping and reducing it everybody's business. So whether you're in, council housing, or you're in South Yorkshire Police, or wherever, parks and countryside, that you would actually you understand what's happening about fly tipping. You see it as an environmental crime. Every bag put down is a cost to someone. It's an affront to the city if you think about it. What's happening? These people are just not doing what the rest of us are doing. So we want everyone to get on board with it. And I think that's what a big part of this will be in terms of the comms campaign, getting round people. So, and speed is often of the essence. Particularly actually on the river tipping, some of that has been awful, and the costs are massive of getting that out.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Mark.
Thank you. Just on the target hardening, Ecclesfield Road in my ward, it's not perfect, but it's a damn sight better than it was. So that target hardening is work. Obviously, it then has the knock-on effects that it goes elsewhere, but I think it does show that we're not a soft touch. And I just had 2 points. I think the strategy looks good. It's obviously a lot of work, so thank you very much for that. I think some of the areas, I mentioned it on the knowledge briefing last week, could be slightly hardened by putting a few kind of indicative targets around how much more are we doing in various areas, but I think they look good to me. The comments I wanted to make just on the education area, so 3.2, if people are on the back, page 208. I just think there are 2 ways I've seen this done when I've lived in other parts of the country. One strategy aimed at the people who are doing this, where you know that if you are prosecuted successfully, we will publicise that. We'll publicise a picture of you, we'll publicise what you did. And then a flip to that is, and maybe this is around the signage on waste sites, is making it clear to the 98% plug sound statistic of people who are not doing this, of saying these people are costing you, and this is how much they're costing you. And actually make it clear to people who are doing the right thing, that if you've got friends and family who are doing the wrong thing, well, it's costing all of us. And I think you should use that phrase at an affront to the city. Everywhere. Love it. But thank you very much.
Thanks. Minesh.
Thanks, and thanks both of you for your work on this. I've got a few questions. I don't know, do you want me to do them all at once or one by one? All at once, okay. So, point 1.6 talks about there being an overall reduction of fly tipping of 7.9%. I just want to check, how sure are we that this is a reduction in fly tipping and not a reduction in reporting? And I guess how certain are we of the quality and regularity of reporting from, for example, Amy, Parks, Housing, on that as well? So the data is until 22-23. Do you have a sense of how it's looking for 23-24, if it's higher or lower? The report mentions we've got a small team of 4.65 FTE. Is that enough? And I guess in an ideal world, what kind of capacity would you like? I know the budget is coming up. 2.5 in the report as well mentions the FPN changes that we agreed in September. Can I check specifically when those changes come into effect? I might have just misread the report, but couldn't quite figure that out from the delivery plan. And then also the delivery plan talks about fly tipping in rivers. The key partners doesn't talk about water companies, or doesn't talk about Yorkshire Water. Is there a role for them to play in, for example, funding CCTV and other enforcement activities, and how much has this been explored? Sorry, first.
Okay, right. I'll keep them brief, these answers, compared to my normal answers. But so overall reduction reporting the incidents, I have to say the national figures on fly tipping, you have to take with a pinch of salt, because over the years there's been massive swings. There's big question marks about how some people report it. Some councils don't report things on the council land, others do. So I think we're best really looking at getting really good on all our own reporting. But I think there have been some issues around how we report things, and part of this will be about really getting that clear with all partners. So a big part of this, I think, is around visibility of costs, visibility of data, and sharing that with you. And we're definitely not there yet, I think it's fair to say, but this is part of that.
These are Sheffield figures that have been provided.
All right, yeah.
So they should be fairly reliable. Sometimes whether the categories are quite correct is a bit open to interpretation, but that's just the way the people who are actually picking up and collecting the waste are categorising it. So whether, for example, I think I've mentioned it in report, there looks to be an anomaly between what DEFRA report as being highway and what Sheffield is reporting as highway. And I think that's because when the operators have picked waste up from a grass verdure of public pavement, they're calling that a footpath, when the DEFRA definition of a footpath probably means a bridle way, you know, public right of way. So they look a little bit different, but in general they're right. And I think these are probably fairly accurate, and there looks to be in line with the national trend, a slight drop. But statistics, I'm not going to say any more.
Yeah, thanks. And then in terms of latest figures, it's a mixed picture where we've put the cameras in on some of the top sites, and we've done target hardening. That's made a transformational difference in some of those areas. Obviously, where the cameras have then been cut down, that's not helped, but you know, we have to look at that. So, but again, I think we need to be better at finding ways of sharing that success and that information. There's one example site in here. We do have lots more pictures and things like that, but I think there's something around sharing it as this strategy develops and the action plan to show people actual improvements and giving the LACs that data. I mean, certainly the LACs will have seen some of those improvements where they've gone in, but again, I take the point that there's a handful of sites that have taken longer for other reasons. In terms of capacity, we've obviously heard the budget report today. We know how tough that is. I think the art in this strategy is, rather than it would be very easy for me to come before you and say, just, you know, give me more money, I need more people in my team. I think, given the state of the council's budget, the sensible approach first is to look at how do we work smarter on this. We think there's massive potential to reduce the numbers by just the things that are in this plan. And I think as part of that, there may be opportunities that come up for invest to save. And I think that could be things like part of the discussions with Amy, some of the things around sponsorship maybe as part of this. You know, we're talking about an environmental toolkit in here. There could be opportunities there. So I think that would be our first line of attack. But if you look across the whole council in terms of the number of staff who are working on the street, working in the street scene, you know, there's lots and lots of council officers. And I think if by bringing them together with a coherent strategy and a plan, building this into their business plans, I think that will increase our capability across the city. The team have often trained other council services to deal with things like giving FPNs and things like that, so I think it's part of that continuum. Do you want to say about the FPNs coming in? Because you've been doing a lot of work on that, haven't you? So,
fingers crossed, it all looks very positive that we should be ready by January. All the letters have been done, they're ready to mail merge. I think the finance income people are working on getting the online payment system set up, and like I said, fingers crossed we should be ready to go January with increased FPN figures. So,
I mean, before I've got more names, but just on that last point, it may turn out that we get more revenue as a result of these increased fines, mightn't it? And then we're duty bound to spend that money, aren't we, Minesh, on the service. You said you didn't need any more people, but what are you going to do with the money if you get it?
Yeah, I think without revisiting that whole report, I think we made it clear in that report, and our finance colleagues who did the scenario analysis as well, that there may be some more money, but actually we could even lose money, because if people don't pay the FPNs and it goes to court, we then don't get that income. That said, I know many of you mentioned the deterrent effect of the higher fines, and actually if people go to court, we might not get the money, but actually that's a big deterrent fine. But I think what we will be doing is we'll be monitoring the impact of those fine changes, and it might be that, you know, within 6 months we're back to you again to say, well, actually here's the figures, we think we should tweak this, and it might be that we move the levers a bit. That's in our gift, isn't it, to get the maximum effect and deterrent. Certainly around things like single bags and things like that. We want to see what's going to happen with that.
Approximately are all fly tipping is household waste. We're not dealing with businesses that are not predominantly businesses that aren't doing the right thing. I think a lot of it is householders, and a lot of them householders probably would struggle with even the lowest fixed penalty rates. So when we're talking about, you know, how many of the big ones will we be issuing, and if we did, would they be able to pay? So
yeah, let's okay.
It's another discussion.
We've had this discussion extensively, haven't we? When we talked about the fees, let's not do it again. But okay.
Final question, wasn't that the Yorkshire Water?
Yeah, sorry, Yorkshire Water. Yes.
Yes. So in respect of that, much of the land is not Yorkshire Water land, but I think they would be part of that broader coalition of who's looking after the rivers and protecting them. So I think that will be an interesting part to develop. But if you want to make an asset of our green corridors, we absolutely have to do more to protect them, and I think that will be a big part. And one of those things might be around looking at how we are structured to make sure that the partners who work in respect of protecting the rivers actually have good contact into the council as to who can help on that, because it's such an asset, you know, isn't it? What, you know, the rivers that we've got.
You'll be aware that the full council agreed a working group of CPL and TRC on looking at the rivers. I resisted the temptation to say Waste and Street Siege will be in there as well, for precisely this reason. So, but maybe we should be. It's also the Environment Agency, isn't it, for rivers?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
key part. Okay, Mary.
Thanks for the report. Really welcome it, and all the items and the proposals in the report as well. We know it's a massive cost to the council, fly tipping, but it's a massive cost to health and well-being in our neighbourhoods, which are blighted by some of this kind of behaviour. I think we do need to come really hard on perpetrators, particularly those rogue operators who take rubbish from one household. The household might know or may not know where the rubbish is going, but they dump it somewhere else in the city. And I've seen rubbish fly tipping in my area coming from another part of the city with names and addresses and in amongst it. So I think what Mark was suggesting about naming and shaming, in effect, is really would be something I would support. And obviously it happens locally as well, but it's not just in my area, from local people. I think I welcome really working with the community, because I think that's really important to get to the heart of that locally. And again, it goes back to putting social pressure on people in neighbourhoods to do the right thing. And there's lots of people, particularly in every area, and particularly in my area, who would love to work with yourselves on developing a local strategy for dealing with the issues we've got. I think Fix My Streets needs to be promoted across the city, and particularly in areas where there are problems, because I know the people who use it that I work with find it really, really useful, and really have taken it to the heart. So working with the LACs, working with local communities, and working with the people that we will work with in my area to deal with these issues, I really, really welcome that. But going strong on enforcement where we can, and I take your point about going to court and it costing us more than it costs other people. But naming and shaming is, I think, important.
Can you just mention one thing on that? As part of the communication strategy for this, I think the development of that will have to be very much in conjunction with yourselves and the LACs. So, meeting with the LACs, what will work for you? What tailored comms do you need in your area? We've seen the success of some of the comms that have been done around litter and using bins. So if you can be thinking of what would you want from that campaign, what would work for you. So I think we'll have an overarching one, but I think there'll have to be some diversity within that to allow you to use what works in your area and what are the underlying drivers of that fly tipping.
So I've already spoken to our manager, the LAC manager, about that, and we are going to get a discussion organised with yourself.
Yeah.
Thanks. Christine.
Thank you, Joe. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the strategy. I think we need it. I think it's a good starting point. We are all, in any ward that we operate in, aware of fly tipping, and it is really hard to find out who's done it, isn't it? Because most of the time there's no identifier. So actually my question has kind of been answered. I was going to say, what kind of waste is it that's mainly fly tip? But I think you said it's mainly household waste. So that means usually that it's probably quite local, isn't it?
Probably.
So neighbourhood strategies will probably have an effect. I was going to say that if it's these rogue operators, so it's not just a household waste that come in, because I mean I've walk on Wadsley Common a lot. There's been kitchen sinks and toilets and all kinds on there, and they're probably not household waste, are they? There's probably somebody come in and taken them away for them.
Yeah, I suppose there's a categorisation. How do they categorise commercial waste as opposed to household waste? I suppose if they're looking at it and it's a household item, they'll say household waste.
So a toilet is a household waste?
It could be classed as a commercial item if it's come from. You probably never know, because some people do rip their own bathrooms out. It's possible. Some of them might be rogue operators, but I think amongst the 60% of it is classified as household waste. There's also a significant amount of that is in form of black bags, which is people's kitchen waste and things like that. But, you know, you will get your rogue operators in there asking people if they want them to take the waste off their garden, front or back garden or whatever. It's a mixture of everything, but a lot of there's no real reason to suspect that it's commercial waste operators, legitimate commercial waste operators that are dumping. So
So I kind of just have a supplementary question, because I go to the waste recycling centres, is that what you call them now?
Yeah,
the dump it sites, all the time. The tip, yeah, and it's all right if you've got your car, you can just go in, isn't it? But if you've got a larger vehicle, you can't go in, and you have to apply.
I'm going to say,
and is that what puts people off? Do they have to pay then to get in with these larger vehicles? They just have to apply in advance.
They want commercial operators or trade waste. They wouldn't let them in. They need to go and get proper waste transfer notes from a legitimate waste site that can accept that kind of waste. But if the only vehicle that you've got in your household is one of the larger vehicles that is not just allowed on site without permission, you would have to make that application, and you would probably get permission to go on the site.
Without paying?
They don't take any fees at the household waste recycling sites at all. You'd have to go to a commercial operator. So I don't think that's necessarily what's putting people off.
Okay.
The rogue operators that would never get on, that have got could be a transit van, could be a flatbed truck, where they're going and collecting people's waste for money, that are obviously waste collectors, probably unauthorised, would never get on the household waste recycling sites. They would have to go onto a site where you've got to pay to tip, and that's what they don't want to do. But both the operator and the person that has paid that operator, if they've not made all checks that are reasonable, that the person is authorised, are both committing an offence.
Okay.
So that's one of the things we need to get out there. It's not just the tipper, it's the person who's passed the waste to the tipper. They're under a legal obligation to check.
So for the benefit of people at home, if you're paying somebody to take your waste away, you need to see their licence to be a waste transfer agent and take a picture of it with your smartphone. Really, so you can say who it was. You know, is that about right?
They're not obliged to take the photograph, but yes, they are legally obliged to make all checks that are reasonable, that they are only transferring their waste to a person that is authorised to take it, and the authority comes from the Environment Agency in the form of a Waste Carriers Authority. So anybody that is not able to say that they've done that
they've committed.
Okay, Waste Carriers Authority, that's what you need to ask for, need to say, okay.
Yep.
So,
Thank you, and thank you for this and for all your other answers, because I think they've been really helpful. Just had a couple of questions. I was just looking at the table on page 216 about all the different types of waste. And my first question is, because you were talking about the increased amount of cannabis farm waste, is that the best way of describing it? And I just wondered where that comes in here. Is there, or should there be, a category for waste that's linked to illegal activity or potential criminal activity? Because those people are not going to take their waste to an official site, whatever, are they? And I just wondered whether that should be categorised separately or where that would come. And the other thing I was just going to ask was about household waste. And I know a lot of it's sort of black bag stuff, which implies small, but then there's quite a lot of other. So I'm assuming that I may be wrong, is mainly larger items, which probably could be taken to a recycling centre. Is there any evidence, and there may not be, but is there any evidence that increasing accessibility to the recycling centres would reduce that amount of waste dumped? For example, does the amount of waste dumped increase when we reduce the opening hours in winter of our recycling centres? And if I'm also, you know, I mean, I use them occasionally, and there's always a long queue. I mean, there is always a long queue. So, could we actually better serve or reduce our fly tipping by increasing our accessibility at opening hours at those sites? And is there any evidence one way or the other?
Okay, so I'll take that second one first then. So in terms of national evidence, the Tidy Britain group and other campaign groups will generally say that better access helps, and I suppose that's to an extent obvious. So that is a factor overall in fly tipping, making sure you've got reasonable provision. But clearly there are criminal elements who, no matter what that provision is, they can't come in on their commercial vehicles, so they'll do it. But there is certainly a degree of friction. If you don't have access to a car, maybe you might be more likely. The whole science on it, in the local context in Sheffield, I don't think we've got that richness of data, but I think that's something that we can explore. But certainly our position is there is more than adequate provision, and it really is not an excuse, particularly when you can get the bulky item collection. That's a great approach. There has been a test in one area over the last year, looking at slightly different models of waste collection. I've not got the full details of that, but certainly access can be a factor. But I don't know whether we've got any actual figures of winter opening and things like that. I mean, if it's dark and people think they can get away with it, I think they may well flight it more. And certainly in some areas of the city at the minute, it is causing us more problems where it's dark at 4 o'clock and people seem to be coming out with the mattresses as soon as it's gone dark. And but there's been some really good, it's been a really good operation in the last 2 weeks on that. That's caught a load of people doing that. So that was good news. And in terms of your categories of waste around the criminal derived waste, I don't think we record it separately, do we? But I think it's something we will want to do on this, because certainly we want to be taking this strategy to the Safer Communities Partnership, and we need to be working a lot more with the police on those gangs and trying to drive that down. So we've got potentially more help we can offer as part of that. The other quick thing to mention is part of our service is also dealing with rogue traders, and if you're someone who's prepared to rip off someone, you're not that concerned about how you get rid of your waste, are you? So I think we've been very, very effective in Sheffield dealing with the criminal rogue traders, and we just need to continue that work and make sure that's linked through in terms of maybe even more targeting of their waste transfer notes and things like that. So is there anything else you want to add? No. So.
Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Just to pick up on that last question, there's no evidence from when we've changed the household waste recycling centres hours to winter hours to see a hotspot around that area. So you'd expect somebody turns up to the site, it's closed, they dump the waste near the site. There's nothing to show on the hotspot map. That's a direct correlation. But you're right. There's no evidence to say does it increase when we go to winter opening hours. There's no evidence to demonstrate that, but it's something we can do a deep dive on. I suppose just jumping back to Councillor Killigan-Gubo's question around permits for vans. So you can apply, if you've got a van registered to your home address and it's your car in effect, you can have up to 12 visits per year, free of charge, but you need to register. If you've got a van not registered to your address, you can have one free visit. So if you hire a van, you can have one free visit to use that van to go to the, but you obviously have to book in advance so the guys on the site know you're coming and they can open up. So that's 12 visits for registered vans to your address and then one visit for a non-registered one. It's on the website and it goes out in the newsletter, but you're right, there is an awareness issue there.
Thanks. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I guess one comment and one question. I think I remember in one of the first committee meetings I was in this year, this issue of, you know, as you said, Tracy, making residents aware that if they are found to have used a rogue trader, then they are legally responsible for that and prosecutable. And we talked about some sort of media relations, press release sort of element with that, but I'm not sure if anything's happened. I haven't read about it in the Star, for example. I was wondering whether that was an opportunity for Joe to get out there and get some photos. Maybe that would help, because I think raising that awareness, you know, it doesn't have to just be Joe, it could be other members of the committee as well, I'm sure. But that would be great, wouldn't it? Yeah. Would that not help? And then on the strike, you know, with the Veolia strike situation, I was wondering whether there was any correlation between that and an increase in fly tipping. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I addressed me partly that. It does have to be just me under the media protocol. That answers that. I think comms are a little bit cautious about how they publicise some fly tipping related things. I mean, it is easy to have unintended consequences with that. So that is possibly one of the reasons for one of the cautions. But I will come back in a moment once you've had an answer.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know whether Richard's in closer to the strike itself than we are, but I'm not aware of any particular impacts. I can't say we've studied the figures in any great detail to identify something like that. You know, I think as part of this project, better data, faster data will help us all. But I've not come across anything on my desk that has said it's got worse on that. Certainly on the comms side, absolutely we'll be picking that up within the strategy. What I would say is we do, when we do prosecutions, we will generally try and get some comms out on it, but you'll all be aware that sometimes there's a balance between the comms going out around, you know, there's all this fly tipping in Sheffield all these positive stories, and I know it's a bit of a balance. And you may have recalled me talking to you previously around someone in our comms team who worked in another authority, and they did in a very urban area, and they did a huge campaign all about fly tipping and what they were doing on it. And at the end of that, when they assessed views of residents thought fly tipping had got worse, even though the stats showed it had got better. And I think what they realised is that some of their comms had probably not helped, and it had made everyone feel that notice more fly tipping. So they spotted it, but actually it wasn't any worse. So, you know, we can learn from that sort of experience on it. So I don't know, was anything else you'd want to add on that? No.
Thank you. I mean, just one comment from me. Well, it's the comment for me so much is I've noticed a number of members have talked about the naming and shaming aspect of it, and so I wonder. I think it's something to take to a knowledge briefing, is to whether to have a little discussion about whether we want to be a bit more, go a bit harder on that. Certainly in some of the more egregious cases. Minesh?
Yeah, I mean, Joe, what I'm hearing is that everyone wants to see you crushing a car and having a video of that as well. I think there's clear consensus.
Well, you know, if I have to, I'm at the service of the committee. Yes, no, but so I just to go back, the naming and shaming thing, I think a number of members raised it. I'm not quite sure, I'm not very clear quite how hard we go on that. I know Mark made said you had some experience at other places where they've gone pretty hard on that. Can we take that away for a discussion as to whether we want to do that? And with that, I think that's all the hands I've seen. So can we move to the recommendations? Are those agreed? I'll take silence as the agreement of the meeting. That is agreed. Thank you all very much. That concludes today's meeting. We have another meeting next week. So let's all look forward to that before we can break for Christmas. But thank you all for coming, and thank you to those at home. Bye-bye.